Okay, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to have you today for this second webinar dedicated to digital transformation. After the first one we did 2 weeks ago around digital commerce for B2B companies. Today it's a real pleasure to arrange and organize this session with ACP and one of the best experts of the customer experience domain today, customer experience challenges and solutions, Ben Notter. He will introduce himself in a couple of minutes. The topic of the day is around data-driven omnichannel. In other words, how to leverage, to use, and to capitalize the data collected or generated with online and omnichannel platforms. Okay, so let's move to the agenda of the day. 4 main sections for this presentation. The first one is a short presentation of the speakers and the companies presenting today this webinar. Second section is an attempt to define what is this concept of data-driven omnichannel. This is a real large and global concept. So what is it exactly and what are the main challenges, trends and definitions? Then with Ben, we will find out and analyze some best-in-class initiatives. So he will present real outstanding approach and initiative using massively data to propose outstanding customer experience. Finally, we will conclude the session with some lessons learned from best-in-class players, how they successfully implement a data-driven initiative, and what are the success factors. Last but not least, a Q&A session. Feel free to ask, and please, there is a place in Zoom where you can ask your questions. So feel free to ask. And please mention in the question, if the question is for Ben, indicate in that case a B in your question, or for me, Thomas, indicate a T in your question, or for both. Okay, we'll have around 5 minutes to do this Q&A session. Okay, so let's start with a quick presentation of the speakers. So let me just show you who I am today. Yeah, so I need to be promoted as an host now to show who I am. Okay, so maybe John, you can, yes. Okay, okay. So here you can see I'm Thomas. So very happy to welcome you today. So I'm in charge of Kerus. Kerus is a consulting on IT company focusing on digital experience and data intelligence. So really the topic of the day, how to propose, leverage and build solutions using data for omnichannel on digital platforms. And I'm in Asia now for around 8 years, and we have a global presence, but I will introduce a little bit more the company in all the continents. Ben, floor is yours to present yourself.
Thanks, Thomas. Yes, so Ben Notter is my name. I'm based here in Singapore, generally traveling across Asia-Pacific region, working with SAP's top customers on their customer experience and omnichannel strategies. And I will spend a lot of time with you as a part of the webinar today talking about learnings and findings that we have in working together with those customers. I'm now in my study in Singapore, as I guess we all are. My wings have been clipped a little bit, but really looking forward to having the conversation with you today.
Okay. So let's move to a very quick introduction about Kerus. So Kerus, who we are and what we do. So we are initially a French company founded 25 years ago. So acting in 2 main domains. Data intelligence and digital experience, both in consulting and implementation. At the end, it's all around transformation using data, transformation using digital, or the best approach, transformation using digital and data. So quick, some figures to introduce a little bit the company. So we are a little bit more than 3,500 people worldwide. We are present in around 20 countries. 310 million USD in terms of revenues in 2019. So 23 years of expertise. And yes, as mentioned before, we have a large footprint in Asia Pacific because we are in Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, of course, and Ho Chi Minh City. Okay, so in terms of customers, here is just a short, quick extract of our major customer references in APAC. So as you can see, we act in all the domains and all the industries, but especially fashion, groceries, travel, B2B, of course, automotive and properties, but also healthcare and cosmetics. So if at the moment you have some thoughts or some initiatives around digital transformation, data, omnichannel implementation, digital implementation, sales, CRM, and so on, okay, feel free to contact us, of course. Okay, let's move to the key concept around data-driven. What is exactly this concept of data-driven omnichannel? Okay, we could summarize it quite simply, okay? What is a data-driven company? It's when a company makes strategic decisions based on data analysis and interpretation. Moreover, a data-driven approach, we could say that a data-driven approach enables companies to examine and organize their data with the goal of better serving their customers and their consumers. To tell that a little bit differently, we could say that there are 3 ages. The first one is to be data aware. It's when the business starts using data analytics for some of its operational processes, not all, but some of them. Data is available at the organization, in the organization, but its value is not fully unlocked. The second age is data-driven. Data-driven is when the business uses data as a primary asset for establishing strategic planning, setting objectives, and assessing future risk. Okay. And the last stage, which is more a little bit the same than the data-driven age, it's insight-driven. It's when the data become available for actionable for all the users, even those without a technical background. So not so many differences between data-driven and insight-driven. It's more a question of how large is the access to the data and how many people are trained and can use the data-driven and approach solutions and models. 6 main trends and challenges today to understand, become, and act as a data-driven company. Okay, we will go and we will detail each of them right now. First one is customer expectations. As you know, customer expectations have changed, more data needed to address and to fit with these customer expectations. Just to illustrate this, we can move to the next slide now. Just to illustrate this, this shift and this major trend, it's e-commerce in the age of data. Just to illustrate it, 4 figures to illustrate how data become key in the customer experience. First one, 56% of customers are more likely to return to a site that offers product recommendation. What does it mean? It means very simply that data is a strategic asset in customer decisions. Very, very important and very key in customer decision, and it will be much more important in the future. So this is only the beginning of the story. Second figure, is 80% of enterprise recorded on uplift since implementing personalization across their store. Simple conclusion, personalized customer experience was before an added value, yesterday. It's, we could say, a no-brainer today, and it will become a prerequisite tomorrow. Just think about it, 80% recorded on uplift since implementation of personalization models. Same figure with Netflix. So just to illustrate a little bit more with concrete and operational examples. Probably you know or you don't, but 80% of Netflix Netflix watch content is based on recommendation. And for Amazon, we talk about billions USD. 35% of Amazon sales are generated from data-driven insights. So just two examples to illustrate how can data-driven companies such as Netflix or Amazon, how they can use in a very smart way and put really the data at the core of their strategy. Okay, let's talk now about personalization and segmentation. New customer expectations leverage massively on data. 10 years ago, the keywords was definitely segmentation. It is now personalization. What does it mean? It means that all the retailers, brand distributors, B2B and B2C, they have to propose personalized, we could say hyper-personalized experiences. To do that, what do you need? You definitely need to leverage on user data. Otherwise, the personalization models implemented won't fit with customer expectations. Examples with Amazon and Netflix, I think, are good illustration of how it really brings value and it really brings business. But you could say in a lot of other domains for a lot of other companies. And what is good is now with solutions such as SAP, for instance, you can completely leverage on the data and quite simply leverage on this data to propose personalized experiences. A major shift today is the growth and the development and the growth of the DNVB. Okay. So what are DNVB? DNVB really changed the landscape, not only the online, but also the offline landscape. What is it? What is DNVB? Digital Native Vertical Brands. It's very simple to explain. DNVB, they sell their own products through their own website. Why we talk about DNVB on data? Because they already put data at the core, at the center of their strategy, building not only new distributions model, but also using massively data in their business at all the steps, all the phases of the process. Okay. When you talk about product creation, when you talk about product selection, pricing, stock management, distribution, cross-selling, upselling, loyalty, they massively, all these DNVB, they massively use data to really build and propose personalized and outstanding customer experiences. Okay. If you want to have a good example, or if you want to check what is a good example of DNVB, really probably one of the best one is Stitch Fix in the US, because they combine subscription, data personalization, and really during all the moments of the life of the customer, they really use a lot of interactions and they collect a lot of data around consumers and customers. So it's very important to see what happened in this domain, in the DNVB domain, just to illustrate how they massively change the game today. And it will be more and more important with what happened with COVID-19. You have 40 DNVB in the top 500 e-commerce players now. The growth is 30% compared to 2018. Okay, so really probably in 2 years you will have more than 100 DNVB in the top 100, in the top 500 of the e-commerce and omnichannel players. DTC is a little bit a different model because DTC is direct to consumer. It's another major shift. Why? It consists for big brands in selling directly to consumers. One more time, this is a major threat for the middleman, for the distributor, but this is not the topic of the day. And DTC sales will reach $16 billion in 2020. Okay, this is a massive increase from what this channel generated in 2015. 2016, 6 billion, 2020, 16 billion. You have here examples with L'Oreal, Lululemon, or different brands. Okay. Why could we say that they are data-driven? Very simple, because for the first time, these brands, they can directly know their customers, their preferences, and their behaviors. So this is really a major change. Before they use distributor, they continue to use distributor, but with this direct access to consumers, with data consumers and data behaviors, data around the behaviors of the consumers, they can really build and propose, yes, best-in-class customer experience, not only online, but also offline. This is a little bit the same story for the data. Of course, more and more data are generated. Here we list and we identify 4 categories of data. Okay, first level, second level, third level, and fourth level. Okay, the difference today is it's quite easy now to collect, to analyze, and to use this data in real-time context to build customer experience platform. Ben will show some very good examples in a couple of minutes. But keep in mind that more and more data to leverage and organize. This is also a challenge, and this is a good transition with the next slide, which lists the key challenges in the data-driven age and for data-driven projects. It's not a long and quiet river to build, propose a data-driven model. You have basically, and we try here to list the 5 challenges to face and to tackle. The first one is not a new one, is around data consolidation. Okay, data consolidation is how to gather on a single point. It could be called data lake or other names, but at the end, it's a prerequisite, and it's not so easy to do, to collect on a single place all the information. You have solutions now to do that, but it's always a challenge because it's more an organization challenge than a technical challenge today, but it's always something to keep in mind, and it's important to don't forget that this is a prerequisite. Second challenge is data usage, how to give access, to manage, and to deal with different rules and workflows. Quite simple on the paper, on a slideshow, but not so easy to implement in the real life. The next challenge is how to clean and use the right data. It's fully possible, it's accessible, but it takes time. When we talk often with, and we have in our company some data scientist profiles. Just for your information, 50% of the time of a data scientist is around cleaning and preparing the data. So even with solutions, it's always a challenge. It's possible to face, it's possible to find solutions, but it takes time. Next challenge is how to put and to transform the data in actions, in actionable approach. It's super important to identify the right use case to generate value with limited efforts. And it's not, one more time, not always so easy to identify this use case, and use case quite easy to implement, not so complex to implement. And the last challenge is probably the more complex, and is really quite painful for a lot of companies, is how to scale beyond POC, beyond proof of concept, a data-driven initiative. We could say, to be a little bit provocative, that deploy a POC is not so complex, but industrialize this POC and really deploy it at a large scale is not so easy, because you have to involve all the domains, all the departments, and all the users, and this is the most complex part. One more time, it's one of the key challenges is beyond all these challenges is around change management, but it's not specific to data-driven project. But it's super important to integrate that once you will have done and deployed your POC, how to really industrialize this approach, because the only way to have on ROI is really to industrialize this approach. When we talk about data-driven, for a lot of people, it's a synonym of personalization, but it's much more than that personalization. It's important to understand that beyond personalization, which is basically product recommendation, okay, you have all the topics around merchandising on operations where you can leverage on the data collected. Okay, we can talk about pricing, content, promotions, customers, products, search. Of course, search represents 40% of the traffic to access to a product page or product information on omnichannel platform. So it's super important to leverage not only on data for product recommendation, like cross-selling and upselling, but also to use it at all the phases, on all the steps regarding merchandising and also regarding operations. We can talk about inventory, we can talk about churn, fraud, demand, returns on orders. So there are a lot of ways and there are a lot of methods where you can leverage on data to optimize operation. The key point is, of course, to identify the use case and to identify the pain points in your company. And of course, Keris, as a consulting company, we can help you to do that. This is the end for the advertising part. Okay, let's move now to the not the last one, but nearly the last challenge is around analytics. Okay, when we talk about data, of course, analytics is part of data-driven. Okay, so what we call good own analytics is continue to be a key and continue to be a success factor if you want to arrange and if you want to use data to improve your performances. Here you can see the sales funnel. Okay, you always remember that at the end, always keep in mind that at the end, 2% only of the traffic will become a real buy. Okay, so 2%. You start with 100 customers and you finish with 2 customers. Okay, in the sales process online. So it's super important to use A/B testing, to use a lot of methods like that. It's not new. Okay, but it's definitely part of the data-driven approach and data-driven models. Last one, and it would be a good transition with Ben's presentation, is around experience management. So experience management is a new concept. What it means implement and use solutions that can help you as a company to leverage and use the data collected at all the steps on all the phases of the digital journey. Okay, so it could be around track and diagnosis, it could be around journey deep dive, it could be around activation and transformation. So the goal of this platform, this new type of platform around experience management is definitely now a part of customer experience approach and solutions. Okay, but experience management is really I would say the new paradigm and the new model with who can really leverage on the assets, the data assets collected through all the different steps of the digital customer journey. So here we list different domains like provide content, provide feedback, help, cart checkout process. Yes, all the domains around the contextual information, actions, alert, notifications. So because basically at the end, through with all the omnichannel platform, you collect so many data, and the goal of the experience management platform is to really use the data and to help you to improve the customer experience. That's all for this first part of the presentation regarding challenges, trends, and new models emerging with data-driven models. So now let's move to the second part with Ben Nuttall. So Ben will share with us different models and different successful initiatives around data-driven approach. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Thomas. If you make me the host, then I'll share the screen. Yes. And get going on there. Everybody, while we're just changing this over, remember if you have any questions, then just type them into the Q&A section of the webinar, and we'll turn that into a conversation as we get towards the end. Hopefully everybody should be able to see my screen now. And what I would like to do for the next 20 minutes or so is to try to bring this concept around data-driven omni-channel to life by talking through some case studies of organizations we're engaging with, predominantly around the region across Asia Pacific, but also some global examples. And I think to put that into context, it's important to recognize that when we talk about customer experience, it is very much the customer that is in control of the experience, and where organizations are therefore focusing on is how do they deliver the outcomes? So how do they fulfill the promises that they're making to customers around the experience? And technology is really the bridge between the freedom of the experiences that the customer has in their journey and the outcomes that an organization now needs to deliver. And the way I like to look at data is that it's the cement that helps to plug all of this together, right? It's the single view of customer, product, price, promotion, channel that helps to glue the omni-channel experience together. And it's the data that helps us to build out the personalization across the journey. And these are the types of things we need to drill into. But it's really key, and particularly if we think about how technology has enabled us to go on about our normal day-to-day lives in the current environment, it's amazing to consider how data has really played a part in that. In order to further, I guess, break that down, it's useful to think from a very simplistic perspective about a customer journey. So a customer gets to understand or interact with a brand as they're carrying out research. They then start to explore different products and pricing options and so on, and then they will choose a product. That's from a customer's perspective. From the company's perspective in delivering the outcomes, really through the interaction phase, they're looking to understand the customer better. Through the exploration stage, they're looking to reduce any friction around the engagement. And through the selection and choose phase, they're looking to deliver and actually fulfill on the promises that they're making. And at any point in this journey, there exists the opportunity for there to be a point of having an outstanding success with the customer, or potentially an experience gap. And there are many examples of that we need to focus on how we can use data in order to be able to resolve that, right? So if we drill down and consider the understand phase, it's worth considering that research shows around 2/3 of consumers don't trust brands with their personal information. So while it's very relevant for an organization to consider how do we collect data on a customer in order to provide a better experience to them, the converse to that is the consumers themselves are not looking to share that data necessarily. And the best practice shows that essentially if we're able to be more transparent with customers around what we're going to do with the data, if we're able to reduce friction in customers being able to actually register with us, if we're able to collect the information in a progressive way, so that means rather than giving the customer a huge form to fill out at the front, if we collect the data progressively throughout the customer journey, and if we're able to have a single identity for the customer across all of our brands, then we will have a significantly better probability that the customer would register. Probably we find around 35% more customers would register if you take this approach. And then through the personalization that you're able to provide the customer through understanding them better, we find that customers who take this approach achieve around a 300% increase in click-through rates for customers. And you can imagine that in industries like retail or in industries like media, it's very easy to be able to derive a direct business case out of this calculation, this 300% increase in click-through rates for customers. Now, an example of an organization I'd like to talk through that I think has done an extremely good job of this is ABS-CBN. So ABS-CBN is the largest media and entertainment conglomerate in the Philippines. And they are a classic omnichannel business. So if you look at their engagements with customers, it's through broadcast media, digital media, all of the different types of digital channels that you could expect, as well as physical engagements with customers through concerts. ABS-CBN run theme parks, studio experience tours, and so on. They have a direct relationship with around 40% of the Filipino population. So that's with around 40 million customers. And their goal is to be able to provide a more personalized experience to those customers. So one of the things that they have done there is to build out a program that they call Kapamilya. So somebody who speaks Filipino can laugh and correct my pronunciation there, but this is essentially meaning family, right? So they want you to join the family. And we can see here that if I have an anonymous experience through one of the digital channels for ABS-CBN, then there would be no personalization for me. But if I then choose to register, it's very clear and transparent to me what the value proposition is going to be in joining the family, right? So with my Kapamilya name, I will now have one log on to all of my sites, and now I'll be able to manage my accounts far more easily. Secondly, it's around reducing the friction. So we can see obviously with using social login and so on with Facebook or other social channels, that's obviously going to make it a lot easier for the customer to register. It's also going to make it easier for brands to be able to understand the customer better or to have a single connection with the customer. What we're finding now more and more, particularly in Southeast Asia countries, in Indonesia, in the Philippines, and in India as well, is that many of the customer segments don't have email addresses. So we're finding with the proliferation of WhatsApp and other mobile-driven channels that people are using their telephone number as a single identity rather than an email address. So one of the ways in which ABS-CBN have been able to increased their registrations now by around 25%, is to provide a mobile login option to use a phone number as a login rather than an email address. Okay, so what we can see is now we've reduced the friction, and then we have a very clear value proposition. So I'm actually able to earn loyalty points. So here I've earned 30 loyalty points by registering, right? So it's rewarding the customer and providing the customer a reason to register, and then making it very easy for the customer to connect their identity with all of the different digital brands that they may have an existing identity with. And through that, I'm then able to collect additional loyalty points. I can then redeem those points for content and so on, right? So this doesn't cost ABS-CBN anything to be able to provide this redemption, but it's of high value to the customer. And we can then see that I'm now connected very easily through the same digital channel. I'm now here as Holly's dad, and I would be able to see personalized content through here, as well as through my One Music account, where I would be able to create my personalized playlist, right? So single account now across multiple channels is going to help ABS-CBN to understand me far better. And essentially what they're able to do now is to from a data perspective, analyze what they call cross-brand synergies. So what that means, for example, from a media perspective, is to say that typically you would segment your customers into your premium customers, and you would segment your content into different levels away as well. What they've been able to find is that people have a lot of guilty pleasures. I think we all know ourselves. I will admit that when I'm at home watching TV, I watch shows that don't necessarily match my own profile, and it's not what people would necessarily expect. But now they're able to connect all of that information together, and they actually understand this at an individual customer level. They're able to be far more granular around that. Okay, so best practice again here is if you're able to collect, manage, and enrich customer data in a frictionless way, so make it very easy for the customer, and a transparent way and a compliant way, because now there are a lot of regulations around here, then you should be able to increase your registrations by around 35%, improve your personalization, and then increase the click-through rate and the engagement level with your customer. Now, second area that we want to discuss here is around how do organizations then go to reduce the friction in the engagements that they have, and how do you stand out while you're doing that? Because I think now almost all organizations have identified that improving customer experience is a very important thing. But most organizations are trying to improve the customer experience based on what they believe the customer wants, rather than what they actually know the customer wants. And the issues behind that are, again, very much related to data. And that is that traditional digital analytics, so whether we're looking at a Google Analytics or an Adobe Analytics to be able to understand how a customer is engaging with a site, will essentially tell us what has happened, but it will not explain to us why it has happened or what has happened next, what is likely to happen next. At the same time, when we're looking at the world from an omni-channel perspective, we must realize that there are many different sources of data, which are typically divided up into silos. So we have our digital data from our e-commerce site, we have our POS data, we have social and other sorts of data. So this is sitting in silos. And thirdly, while some organizations are starting to try to use voice of customer, so they're trying to ask customers what it is that they want, generally when they're using basic tools like the Survey Monkeys of the world and so on, it means that they're basically asking customers all the same question, and they're not able to combine the information together here, right? So Thomas introduced the concept earlier of experience management, and what experience management enables you to do is to manage this far more programmatically. It allows you to be able to essentially set up what we call listening posts across different parts of your digital property, and to be able to connect digital and physical product channels together, and to enable far easier collection of customer feedback through there. So here, for example, we can see a dashboard that has been created through collecting feedback from an e-commerce site. We can see here that we are combining transactional data from the e-commerce site. Here we can see revenue, we can see promotion-driven revenue, we can see conversion ratios and so on. So this is classical e-commerce analytics, together with voice of customer analytics, such as a customer satisfaction score, right? So we understand here the correlation between the customer's experience and the impact that that's actually having on revenue and products and so on. The important point here is that we're not only able to collect and combine the data together in a very seamless way, but we're able to surface insights. So generally, what we find is that organizations who have very fixed analytics do what we call score chasing. So they might chase a net promoter score and everything is focused on the net promoter score. And here we can see that customer satisfaction is increased by 11%. So everything's looking good. We don't need to worry about this anymore. But in actual fact, we can see here that this dashboard surfaces insights. We can see that the cart NPS is reduced by 10%. And if we drill down on that, we can better understand what's actually happening as a part of the shopping cart step within the journey. Right? We can see the trend over time, and we can see that in January, there was a significant drop-off in customer satisfaction as a part of the site, the cart step. And we can see here that the top reason for abandonment was that there was a confusing checkout process. And we can then even see, based on textual information that's been captured from the customer and surfaced here, on what the keywords are and whether there are positive or negative sentiment around these words. So we would very easily be able to see here that if there was a change in late December that was made to the payment process as a part of the cart, that has had a major negative impact on customer satisfaction, and we could correlate and understand what the impact for that is on revenue, right? So using data to be able to collect more effectively, firstly, to be able to combine, to be able to proactively surface insights, and then to be able to engage and deliver actions based on those insights. So typical type of result that you would see from here. So this is a case study from Sprint. So Sprint is, or I should say was, the 4th largest mobile operator in the United States. The reason I say was is because if you see the news, they've just been acquired by T-Mobile. All right, so this is quite recent. Sprint has been engaging in a very strong experience management program. And as a part of that, they've really been focusing on the reasons behind a 58% cart abandonment. And by using predictive analytics and understanding the variables, surfacing insights and so on, through very similar dashboards to how I've shown you, they've been able to reduce that cart abandonment rate by 22%. And that has a direct impact on revenue of around $7.2 million per annum. Right? So we can see the type of result that is put into place by engaging in a program like this. A few examples of how this is used. So I've spoken about overall site or app experience. Other areas that this can be used at is for customer journey optimization. So really looking at what we call a longitudinal journey for a customer, which is then very important from a customer data perspective, that you're able to get the customer to identify themselves, because then you can connect a journey between online and offline and really understand holistically what's happening across all of those steps. Right, so this is a more comprehensive program. All very basic programs, again, are looking at areas just like content effectiveness, understanding not only the site experience like the shopping cart, but the product descriptions, the contents. If you're running campaigns, do more effective A/B testing on the collaterals and so on. Okay. So this is really understanding. Understanding is understanding who the customer is, encouraging the customer to share with you who they are, and then understanding and being able to measure gaps in the customer experience to be able to prioritize and fill those gaps accordingly. Next step is around engagement. So what we are finding from an engagement perspective is that analytics has been used within e-commerce for some time to personalize. And I think the most classic example was probably around product recommendations. We know that Amazon has really made that sort of a best-in-class capability that everybody wants to be able to measure up to. But what I'm seeing now is more personalization right across the customer journey. And the classic example of that for me here is an organization by the name of ShopperStop. So the audience that's dialed in from India, of course, would know ShopperStop very well, but for everybody else, this is a leading departmental store in India, and fashion is a very large part of ShopperStop's portfolio. And we can see here that what ShopperStop is focusing on is filling an experience gap around organizations who want to buy clothes, consumers who want to buy clothes online. But a major issue with that is obviously people not being sure about the right size that they want to order. So from a customer experience perspective, it's very basic, 4 quick questions. What's your height, your weight, how do you like to wear your clothes? Are they tightly fitted or loosely fitted? And what's your body shape? But through collecting this information and then correlating that together with data on previous purchases, returns, customer demographics, experience, and so on, they're able to use machine learning to be able to optimize the recommended size for different customers for different SKUs of apparel. And they're even able to bring that into the personalization and the recommendation of different products depending on what's available and what's likely to fit that customer. Now, you can imagine the impact that this potentially has on a business. We can see here research from Forrester that says e-commerce will account for around 36% of global fashion sales by 2022. This was in 2018. Nobody knew that COVID was coming, and I'm pretty sure that you will find that it's more than 50% this year, right? So that has been well and truly overachieved. But what's interesting here is that 20 to 30% of online apparel orders are being returned, and 70% of those returns are due to problems with fit. So where we're able to look at personalization around not only product recommendations, but other key experience gaps and how we use data to do that, the level of improvement in customer experience, but also the viability of a complete business model starts to really stand out. And this is one of the key trends that we are seeing now in fashion. The other trend that we are seeing around customer engagement is what I would describe as being commerce everywhere. So commerce everywhere is the concept that we are able to start to deliver these experiences from an omnichannel perspective, not only online and within the store, but commerce should now not be a shopping cart. It should be an option that's available anywhere. So if we are engaging through social media and we see a product that we like, we should be able to buy it there in social media. There has been a really significant growth in online sales through WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and other chat apps as well. And what we are finding now is from an omnichannel perspective, there has been a lot of growth in augmented reality, which is really bringing a digital experience into the store. What I would expect to see now that people are more socially isolated is a growth in actually bringing the store experience to the customer through digital channels. And that's obviously helping us to identify who the customer is, engage more with them, collect more data from a personalization perspective. And we can see here that that data-driven personalization is then delivered to the customer through augmented reality. And I have a demo here I won't talk through due to time, but I'll share a link to a recording of this in the chat session later. Interesting conversation I was having with Tata Croma recently, who is a key retailer in India, again, that's into electronic appliances and white goods and so on. What they were saying is that they're using augmented reality to essentially be able to bring a kitchen into a store, so that when you're looking at a fridge, you can see what that fridge would look like as a part of your kitchen. Customers who are engaging in this sort of online and offline transaction together have around a 20% higher conversion rate, and the size of the shopping cart was around 2.5 times larger, right? So it's a really significant part of the customer engagement to be able to do that. Now, final example that I want to speak about is from a delivery perspective. And again, omnichannel when it comes to fulfillment is one of the really key areas that many organizations in retail are focusing on, because the question now is, what is the value of the retail store? Of course, customers who have been able to walk into a retail store have a much higher level of affinity with a brand. So when you have the convenience of a digital engagement combined with the brand affinity and trust of a physical location, then you're able to significantly improve the level of retention of a customer. But what we are finding is that from a customer journey perspective, it's something that's very complicated to be able to bring online and offline together. I want to speak about an example of a company that's been able to do that very well. And this is an organization by the name of B-Store. So B-Store is one of the leading snack retailers in China. They have around 2,000 stores across around 100 cities in China. And key concept for B-Store is to provide excellent snacks, obviously, but it's around being where the customer is. So here we see an example of a physical store, but we can see now that B-Store also has their own digital property. So this is their commerce site, and they have their own mobile applications through iOS and through Android, as well as call center and so on. And this is enabling them to manage an omni-channel journey where experience, I should say, where the customer is able to buy online and you're able to fulfill from the store. Now, in order to be able to manage that, you need to have a single view of the customer, of the product, of the inventory, of the price, and of the content across all of the different channels. And they've put in place a central platform, a commerce platform, to be able to manage that and bring all of that together. Now, to extend that out and extend the concept of B-Store wanting to be where their customers are, you need to understand that the market, the online market in China is very digital marketplace driven. So you need to be present in Tmall, and you need to make sure that you have your same products, prices, promotions, ingredients, in particularly for snacks. It's very important to have accurate ingredients for customers with allergies and so on. And you need to be consistent within Tmall. You need to be consistent in Taobao as well, where you can see the products listed here. In JD, where you can see the products listed here. In YHD, where you can see the products listed here. Right, so this concept of omni-channel in China is really about being able to manage your brands where the customers are, but then being able to bring all of that together and to leverage the value of your physical location from a trust perspective and from a cost and fulfillment perspective. B-Store on Singles Day had fulfilled more than 1 million orders in a single day, ordering online through these channels and fulfilling from the 2,000 stores that they have across China. And so this is giving you an idea of the importance of data when it comes to providing a seamless omni-channel experience. So for me, hopefully those case studies are useful. We spoke about the concept of customers owning their own experience. We spoke about how companies are focusing on delivering outcomes, right? So this is how we're able to close the gaps between these. And we spoke through the 3 basic concepts of understanding the customer, engaging, and fulfillment. All of the case studies that we spoke about are delivered through SAP Customer Experience Platform. We have the experience management component, which is powered by Qualtrics, the customer data component, the commerce component, and the marketing component are predominantly powering the case studies that we've spoken about today. And I'm more than happy to have a more detailed case study on any of that. So Thomas, hopefully that was useful, and I've done my best to keep to the time, but probably gone a little bit over. But I'll hand the control back to you now.
Thank you very much, Ben. You are perfect in terms of timeline, so everything is fine. So now we'll just conclude the session. We'll just conclude the session. Maybe we can try to share the screen now. Okay, so just wait 1 second. Okay, and we'll share the final screen just to conclude the presentation today and talk 5 minutes around methodology, roadmap, and conclude the discussion with a Q&A session. Okay. So for all the attendees today, we hope, of course, that you learn a lot around data-driven, how data-driven can really be a game changer in terms of customer experience and productivity. First of all, and first advice today is to assess where you are. Okay. Here you can see 6 phases in terms of solution implementation, from good old CRM to segmentation, personalization, predictive action, and real-time optimization. But it's really important, it's really strategic to assess objectively where you are now and what is the maturity of your organization, regarding the different data-driven approach and solutions. So first point, assess where you are. Second point is qualify the maturity per feature, crossing this information with your industry. We can move to the next slide. It's super important to understand what is important depending on your industry. Of course, personalization doesn't mean exactly the same depending on the industry, and the maturity of the different features is not the same. We can just move to the previous slide just to finish this part. So the maturity of the feature and what is important in your industry. Cosmetics, B2B, fashion, groceries, they don't have exactly, and you don't need exactly the same level of personalization, the same type of data-driven models. So could be very different depending on your industry. So it's important to cross this information. What are the key features for your industry with the maturity of the features? Because of course, when we talk about segmentation, when we talk about cross-selling, they are definitely mandatory and they are a must-have now. Content personalization is also key, but it's definitely less mature. Okay, even if you saw with some examples provided by Ben that you can do right now a lot of things, but it's important really to qualify maturity of your organization and the maturity of the features, depending on, of course, also on the customer expectations. Let's move now to the 5 steps. So this is a methodology we propose in our company, Carus, the 5 steps for a successful initiative. The first one is analysis, of course, and analysis, of course, as much as possible with data and analytics. Second step is to identify some relevant use case, not only general and global use case, like, okay, I would like to have a better pricing, or I would like to optimize my stock, but really try to identify the pain points and the detailed pain points you have, because more detail we'll have, better will be the result with data-driven project. All of them presented today, of course, with Ben are not, of course, irrelevant for you, for your industry, your maturity on your priorities, but it's super important to do this job, to do this identification job. And next step, to select the right use case by mapping business value with the complexity. Okay, how to proceed? Of course, the best way to do is to map the initiative, to map the use case with 2 dimensions: business value of the feature, of the solution, initiative, and complexity to implement this initiative. Of course, lowest level of complexity and highest business value are probably the best candidates in the near future for you. Then launch with a test and learn model. And last point, last but not least, scale, industrialize, which is probably the most difficult part, as explained before in the presentation. To conclude this presentation, what do you need in terms of organization, in terms of team, to deploy data-driven project? According to us and according to our experience, there are 4 key skills to onboard. Business owner or product analyst, of course, super important to create the bridge and limit the gap, let's say like that, between the business and the technical requirements, but business owner is super important. Data champion is the voice of the data, not the voice of the customer, but the voice of the data, to understand the data life cycle and the value of the data and bridge the gap between technology and data. Next one, next profile, next key profile is architect or tech lead, to of course, understand the technical constraints, plan and orchestrate the implementation. And last one is the UI UX designer to bridge the gap between tech and customer expectations. So if you have those 4 skills in your team, okay, we could say that you are ready to launch a data-driven project or a data-driven initiative. So it's really at the end, the success is the ability to, yes, to gather all these profiles and all these expertise in one team if you want to succeed and if you want to launch this kind of project. One more time, to improve customer experience and productivity for your organization. Let's move now to the last part. The last part is Q&A. So last part is Q&A. So we have a first question from David. Okay, in which team would the data champion be? In a business team or in a technical team, to better understand what a data champion will do? Good question, David. Thank you very much. But data champion is it doesn't belong specifically to a team. Okay, the key point at the end is to build a feature team or a global team onboarding technical profile and data profile. At the end, we could say that the data champion need really to have technical skills, of course, because at the end, he will be able to clean the data, to prepare the data, and to assess which kind of data are reliable or are useful for which kind of project or which kind of initiatives. But I would say probably, and in majority, this profile has to be and need to have technical skills and technical yes, technical knowledge. Other questions today? Not for the moment. Maybe we could have one. Okay. I think we have another one coming. Yes, Ben, question for you regarding the implementation of a solution, of a, let's say, data-driven omnichannel solution. Okay, how long we have to? How long is a typical project?
Good question. So I think, Thomas, I really liked the slide that you presented towards the end there that showed the different steps and the recommended approach. For us, especially in the stage that we're in on the market and the environment that we're in at the moment, we would really recommend an agile approach where organizations would start big and think small. And I think one of the earliest steps that we would need to have is really to understand. And that's why, for me, experience management, and if you look at the type of process that somebody like Sprint has taken, as a first step, really just to understand what your customers need, what the experience gaps are, and to use that in order to prioritize what to do next in an agile way is very important. So, you know, to be able to have something like that up and running can be a matter of weeks. It doesn't have to be a long project. But if you're looking at, you know, the complete end result of an organization like a B-store that's really delivered a full online, offline, omni-channel with the POS, processing millions of orders, you know, and fulfilling from the stores and so on, just to be able to set up the processes and the partnerships and so on, you know, is certainly more than a 12-month proposition for somebody like that, right? So just to give you an idea of the different scales, but it doesn't mean to say that they're not getting value along the way in all of each of the different steps that they would take, right? So that's why I would really recommend just to start with that understanding of the customer, understanding of the gaps, and then prioritizing step by step how to fill those things in, and not to be overwhelmed by the size of the complete customer experience transformation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. We have also another question from Eloise, which is, what would be the first steps to implement a data-driven strategy in a company? So I think we can switch to the previous slide. The previous slide is a good explanation of the different steps. but definitely the first step is analysis. Okay, so analysis as much as possible with data on analytics. What are the main pain points existing in the company? What are the domains you can improve quite easily and quickly? So analysis is definitely the first step. Usually it starts with, let's say, consulting. It could be internal or with external companies, but it's super important to succeed this analysis phase. Otherwise, if you don't have the right data and the right diagnosis at the beginning, it will be tough to implement the right strategy. We have another question from Albin. How do you data e-commerce in your industry that does not track that much traffic as Amazon? Yes, good question. Maybe you can have a view on it, Ben. Of course, most of the companies, they don't have so much data compared to Amazon. So how can you implement data-driven omnichannel, even if your company is quite poor in terms of data?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I think it'd be useful to choose a specific industry, because I think each industry is going to be slightly different. But if you look at a typical, retailer or a typical, consumer products company that then wants to look at a direct-to-consumer strategy, they make a decision on whether they want to sell through their own store, their own e-commerce store, or through a marketplace. And effectively what they need to realize is that selling through a marketplace, on one side there's the benefit, which is that's where many customers are and it's very quick to set up, but on the other side it's a disadvantage because they're in some ways competitors, and the likes of Amazon and Alibaba and others are using data in order to design and release their own products. They have their own fashion brands, they have their own white label products as well. So when you're selling through those channels, you're effectively helping somebody else to design their own products to compete against you. So the reality is, what we're finding is that most organizations are doing both, right? They're setting up their own brand stores because it's important for them to maintain the purity of their brand and to really control the experience, and that's where they would want the customers to engage with them. But then they're engaging with other, through marketplaces as well. As far as the minimum traffic that is required, it doesn't need to be that high to justify setting up your own brand store. If we're thinking about a retail example, it depends on the category, but many of the customers who are making purchases inside the store are making that decision based on an engagement that they've had through a digital channel. So that should not only be attributed to the online revenue, but also the influence that it has and the impact it has on the offline revenue.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. I think, yes, it's an interesting point of view and interesting recommendation regarding how to manage data when you are not Amazon. I think it's an insightful approach and perspective. So I think that's the end of the presentation now. We are a little bit beyond the schedule. So I think we can close the session now, the webinar. Thank you very much for joining this session. Last point, if you could raise your hand if you find this session isn't interesting. So just raise your hand and it will be helpful for us to see how this session was interesting for you.
Thank you, everybody, as well from me, and thanks Thomas and the Keros team for having me. It's been a great conversation, and really appreciate everybody's time.
Yes, thank you very much, Ben, and thank you very much to all the attendees. And feel free if you need the presentation. Of course, the presentation has been recorded. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.